So Li Jingliang versus Daniel Rodriguez went down, and there seemed to be a lot of controversy about that decision. I had to go back and watch it a few times to really grasp who actually won that fight. Was it in fact a robbery, as everybody is claiming to be? And that's what we're going to be looking at. But firstly, what did the judges see? How did they score this fight? All the judges disagreed on scoring the fight. The first judge, Mike Bell, gave the first round to Li Jingliang, the second and third to Daniel Rodriguez. Douglas Crosby gave the first 2 rounds to Rodriguez, the third to Li Jingliang. And Ron McCarthy gave the last 2 rounds, second and third to Li Jingliang, while giving the first to Rodriguez. So they all scored the fight completely different, which added up to Rodriguez winning the fight by a split decision. But were they correct? Well, we'll skip over that second round. We don't need to really look at it because Li Jingliang won it. He obviously won that round. He had the most damaging shot of the whole round, actually stunned Daniel Rodriguez, while the rest of the round was very, very close. Whereas the first and the third, it wasn't as obvious. So we're going to be looking at the first round, and then if we have to, we'll look at the third. And in order to judge the fight, you have to go by the scoring criteria, which pretty much says that damage trumps everything. Whoever lands the biggest shots of the round wins the round. So let's start with that first round, and Rodriguez lands a light jab as Li is moving away from it. And later, after Li missed a leg kick, there was an opening for Daniel Rodriguez to enter, and he wings over a right hook, which just grazes Li as he's moving his head with the punch. While Daniel Rodriguez is getting uber aggressive, trying to land his power punches, he lets his defense down, and Li, while switching stances backwards, cracks Rodriguez with a pretty good right hook that causes Rodriguez to move backwards after. Li lands a light leg kick, and then Rodriguez after, as Li is getting aggressive, lands a body kick, and at the same time, Li is trying to enter with a own body shot of his own, which partially lands, and he drops his right hand, which leaves an opening for Rodriguez to connect on him with a pretty good left hook, which actually spins Li's head around a little bit, as well as causes him to stumble, but the kick also has something to do with it, knocking him off balance. Li then lands a body kick, which lands with his toes, taps the outside with a leg kick. Rodriguez lands a leg kick of his own, then adds on to the light strikes with a body jab. And then Li gets in there with a classic combo that he throws that right straight into a looping left hook combination. And as he's throwing the right straight, he gets touched a little bit by Rodriguez's counter right hook. And then right after, Li follows up with another body kick very similar to the one he landed last time. They both exchange leg kicks on each other. Li lands 2. Then Rodriguez retaliates with a jab as Li is moving away from it. This is a common occurrence that you're going to see. Usually when Rodriguez is landing jabs, Li is always leaning away from them and trying to counter with his lead hook. And this actually happens vice versa when Li is trying to get in there with a right straight and lands at the end of it while Daniel Rodriguez is leaning away and trying to counter him with his check hook. And then Rodriguez actually lands it the next time. Li gets aggressive, tries to come down there with a combination, gets touched by a check right hook. Another one of those body kicks from Li Jingliang lands. Doesn't really have too much impact, doesn't really affect Rodriguez at all. And then later, Li lands a leg kick as Rodriguez is trying to land a spinning back fist. And then we get to a medium attack from Li Jingliang as Daniel Rodriguez is trying to get in there with a jab. Li parries this and then lands a pretty good body kick on Rodriguez that gets a good reaction out of him. This one lands with the shin, not with the toes. Li touches him with a leg kick. Rodriguez throws up a high kick this time, which grazes and gets mostly blocked. Not much impact in this, just Li trying to get away from it. A good push kick from Li Jingliang pushes him away but doesn't hurt Rodriguez at all, and then they exchange punches on each other where Li is extending with that right straight without really setting it up, but it still lands at the very end of it, and then he also gets countered by that check right hook. Both light attacks, both really didn't do much, but Li was able to follow this up with a left overhand that just touches Rodriguez. As you can see, most of the shots are just grazing, not fully landing. Leg kick from Rodriguez doesn't really have much impact, and Li is getting aggressive again with those blitzing combos and just gets touched again by that check right hook. Seems to be a repeating pattern. Li reaches in there with a right straight that lands at the end of it, while Daniel Rodriguez is also leaning away. Then Li throws a few leg kicks here, so he touches him with an oblique kick. Doesn't really get much out of Rodriguez, but then after lands a big front kick to the body, and this one seems to get a reaction out of Rodriguez a bit. So another medium attack for Li Jingliang, then they both throw leg kicks at each other and they both land, but Li's gets checked. And because of the check, Rodriguez was able to get out of this exchange better than Li did and able to follow this up with a jab up top, and then after, he was able to go to the body with one. So he's switching up targets, and just to follow that pattern, then he goes back up to the head and lands another one on Li. Then Li was able to land a slight leg kick as Rodriguez is spinning around, losing his balance, and then able to land another one, but this one gets a bit of a reaction out of Rodriguez. From the kick, you could definitely see Rodriguez loses his balance a little bit, and it wasn't like his leg got kicked outward or anything. It was just a sheer impact of the blow. And then Li followed this up with the last strike of the round lands a big oblique kick, but this one to the thigh, but you could definitely see the impact of the shot. Gets Rodriguez stumbling backwards. And that was the end of the first round. So by tallying up all the strikes and looking at the damage, it's clear who won the round. Li Jingliang should have won this round. He landed 4 more total strikes and 4 more medium strikes, while they equal out 18-18 in light strikes. It's an obvious round to score for Li Jingliang, but the judges scored this one for Rodriguez, which is crazy. There's absolutely no argument for Daniel Rodriguez to win the first round. So by this point, we know that Li Jingliang won the fight. But let's look at that third round just to see if that round can actually go to him, if it's warranted. How bad were the judges in this fight? So we start the third round and Li lands an intercepting jab as Rodriguez retaliates, landing a light jab to the body and then after going up to the head. So this is a thing he kept doing throughout the fight. He lands one to the body and then lands to the head afterward, constantly creating openings for himself. Then we get into a bit of an exchange here. Rodriguez lands an inside leg kick without much power. Li reaches in there with a right hand to the body, which only grazes. I don't even know if it would even count, to be honest, because there was barely any connection with it. We'll go back to it if we have to, but Rodriguez lands a bigger jab. Not enough impact, not enough power to categorize it as a medium attack, but definitely bigger than anything else that landed in the round so far. Then Li gets an even bigger strike in there, wings over a big overhand left that lands clean on Daniel Rodriguez and gets a bit of a reaction out of him as Rodriguez trying to land a check right hook of his own, definitely a medium attack. Then Li follows this up with a right hook to the body. This one could be debated to be a medium or a light. The reason why I'm going to probably categorize it as a light is because it doesn't really cause that much impact. It doesn't really get a reaction out of Rodriguez. But for argument's sake, we'll go back to it if we have to. Then Li throws in there a couple leg kicks. One of them lands, and then the other one gets checked. Then Rodriguez follows us up with 3 jabs of his own, all landing like right at the end of it, not really getting much out of them. Later, as Rodriguez is reaching in there with a left straight, Li was able to pull away from it just enough and graze him with a check left hook. Leg kick from Li, and then they get into an exchange where they both land pretty good shots on each other. Rodriguez first lands with a jab, just at the end of it, doesn't really create much impact. And then Li lands a check left hook as Rodriguez lands a straight left, and they both stumble each other a little bit. So definitely both medium attacks there. Jab from Rodriguez lands, and then Li retaliates with 2 leg kicks of his own. Another exchange where they both land on each other. Rodriguez extends in there with a jab, lands as Li is trying to exit away at an angle, and at the same time, Li catches him with a check left hook. And at this point of the fight, you could definitely start to tell that Li Jingliang was getting a little bit tired. So inside leg kick from Rodriguez lands, and then he follows us up with a jab as Li is leaning away from it, trying to counter. And because he's against the fence, because his back is to the cage, he wants to get some pressure out there. He wants to aggressively get Rodriguez to back up, so he swings over a big combination. And as Rodriguez is trying to counter, Li Jingliang bobs and weaves under and lands a big left overhand that gets a good reaction out of Rodriguez. Then they both graze shots on each other. Li Jingliang is still getting aggressive, trying to get some space. He lands a body shot as Rodriguez slightly lands a check right hook. Li made an error here of following up as Rodriguez is moving away, which is going to cause him to overextend. And because of that, there's a big opening. Rodriguez lands a jab, and this one was different than the rest. This one definitely gets a reaction out of Li Jingliang, and especially with the fact that Li is getting tired here, most likely because he cut more weight than Rodriguez, so that's definitely going to have an impact on his body. He wasn't able to brace for the punch as well as he did before. Then Li lands another big shot, another medium attack, cocks back a big right overhand that lands on Rodriguez. I don't know how he took the shot so well, but this one I would have to say is a medium attack, for the fact that it didn't like rock Rodriguez or anything. Another jab from Rodriguez lands, and then as Li's gaining a bit more respect out of him, Rodriguez is now bobbing and weaving, trying to avoid the aggression. He grazes a left uppercut to the body, and then afterward follows up with a grazing jab. He touches Li with an inside leg kick, and then as Li is showing good head movement, he touches him with a jab afterward. They exchange shots on each other. Li is extending in there with another right straight that lands at the end of it, and then Daniel Rodriguez retaliates with a jab of his own, both light attacks. Another grazing jab from Daniel Rodriguez, and then he checks Li's leg kick. They both exchange shots on each other again. This time as Rodriguez is getting in there, he's extending with a left straight to the body, which just touches the chest. He gets grazed by Li's counter jab, as he follows up and grazes with a jab of his own. And then they both exchange leg kicks on each other, as Rodriguez ends that little exchange with a body jab. Then Rodriguez gets in there again, extends with a jab, as Li slips on the inside of it, as well as bobs and weaves, creating momentum for an overhand that lands on Rodriguez. This one could be argued to be a medium or a light. We'll come back to it if we have to. A light check left hook from Li Jingliang as he's trying to extend his combination. And then Rodriguez lands a combo of his own while moving backwards, which was pretty impressive. So he touches Li Jingliang with a check right hook as Li is overextending with his aggression. And intelligently, he hops at an angle, getting a good view for a follow-up shot on Li, and he lands a good jab because of it. This is the kind of angle you can get the most powerful shots off on. And that jab definitely got a good reaction out of Li Jingliang. And Rodriguez starts to feel himself here. He starts to land some good shots. He lands 3 light jabs on Li. And as he's trying to put on this pressure, he gets touched by Li's counter jab, and then almost gets hit with a low blow. It looks to be just above the cup, so I guess we're going to count it, as Li lands a right straight to the body. Rodriguez is unloading that jab again. He lands another 3, but ultimately gets outgunned by Li in this exchange here, as Li slips on the outside of the jab, knowing that Rodriguez is getting kind of trigger happy with it, and lands a big right straight. This is the biggest shot of the whole round, 100%. And then Rodriguez ends the round landing a check right hook as Li is trying to get this aggression out there again, and then follows that up with a light jab. And that ends the 3rd round. You could kind of tell the guy that was being more aggressive was actually the one that was losing the fight, which is an interesting dynamic. So by tallying up all the strikes and looking at the damage, this one's close. This one could go either way here because the amount of total strikes that Rodriguez has there is pretty stunning, 37, which is 14 more than Li Jingliang's total strikes. He landed 16 more light strikes, but Li Jingliang had the damaging shots of the round. He landed 1 more medium and he has the only heavy strike of the entire round, which makes it murky here because if you look at the judging criteria and how it's written, immediate damage trumps over cumulative, but it never really tells you when cumulative damage can trump over immediate. It never even mentions it. So according to the judging criteria, the way it's written, if we go word by word, the 3rd round would have to go to Li Jingliang. And we even gave Rodriguez a bit of a benefit of the doubt for the fact that there were a couple strikes from Li Jingliang, specifically 2, the body shot and the overhand, that could have also been categorized as medium, which is going to jump that up to 6. And that is doubling Rodriguez's medium strikes. So at the end of the day, Li Jingliang should have won the 3rd round as well. And what does that mean about the judges? Was this fight in fact a robbery? Absolutely. It was actually one of the worst robberies we've seen in recent years. And this fight showed how incompetent some of the judges can be because they gave Rodriguez 2 rounds out of the 3. When there's actually no argument that Rodriguez could have won a 2nd round. You can argue that the 3rd goes to him, but no way the 1st or the 2nd. And not only that, look at the way the judges even scored this. They gave the 3rd round to Jingliang and the 1st round to Rodriguez. There's more of an argument that Rodriguez won the 3rd, and there's no argument that he won the 1st. So they scored it opposite, which is crazy. And you can't help but feel bad for Li Jingliang for everything that happened that week. Fighting at a disadvantage against an opponent that weighed 10 pounds heavier. He lost a superstar that he was going to fight. And at the end of it all, he gets robbed of a fight that he should have comfortably won on the scorecards. And Li Jingliang's face at the end of the fight when Bruce Buffer was reading the scorecards tells it all.